Hey, my name is Frankie. I'm a recovering alcoholic.
Hey, Frankie.
And my sober date is January 2nd, 2009, and I have proof. A little tattoo right here. And I'm just grateful for this program. When I came here, I was at the end of my rope. I was tired. And in my mind, what I thought was that this is for sissies. Like, this is for people who tap out. I thought I was going to drink for the rest of my life. I really did. I didn't think that I was an alcoholic. You couldn't have paid me to believe that I was an alcoholic because I still had material things. I still had a lot of things when I got here, but what I had also was a hole in my soul. And I just didn't know what to do. And so I didn't come here kicking and screaming and all of those things this time because the first two DUIs, I had to come here, but I thought I was very smart, like most alcoholics do. And I came to one meeting and I saw they signed a slip, and then I just used those. I think I went to one or two, and then I just used those signatures over and over again. So it worked. Oh, that's my phone. Hold on, sorry. Um, and so I just think about where I am today and where I came from. And it started in Altadena, California. I wasn't born there, but where all of my issues started. And if you know anything about Altadena, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Altadena is what they would consider an affluent area in California. And I grew up there, and there was some apartments. They were like sat right smack dab in the middle of Altadena. And in these apartments was like drug activity and gangs and everything. And these are the apartments that I grew up in. So we grew up in little pods. There were like 8 apartments. The way that they were set up, you kind of come in. It was like a cul-de-sac, but of apartments. So you come into the gate, and on this side there's apartments, and on this side of apartments, and there was four on the side, four on the side. So we lived down here. So this was like my family, away from my family. So I grew up around these folks, but I saw a lot in that time. So what I saw was some good things, and what I saw were some not so good things. What I saw was waking up in every Saturday morning listening to music because the neighbor Pam was cleaning her house and making all her kids clean the house. And I just remember waking up to music every Saturday at 8 a.m. And so I'm watching the Smurfs, and they're playing music and cleaning house. I heard domestic violence. So my neighbors over here, they would fight, and my neighbor would beat up his wife, and none of us called the police. It was normal. So we thought. My other neighbor upstairs, there was a rumor that she was having intercourse with animals. I don't know if it's true, but we would hear the dog howling. I'm just saying. So, what else are you going to do when you have all of this going on around you? And in the front of the apartments, because we lived in the back, was all of the gang members, the ABC Altadena Block Crips, because I lived on Altadena Drive. And they were selling drugs, jumping in and out of cars. And a lot of times at first, my grandmother wouldn't necessarily let me go to the front. But what happened was I started coming to the point where I wanted to have money in my pocket. I didn't like not having money in my pocket. And how I found out about this was in therapy, that my drive, why am I so ambitious? Why do I have this drive? So what I found out was there was a little white kid who teased me about buying food with food stamps. So when that happened, I was so embarrassed by this because remember, I grew up in an affluent area. It's just this one little apartment there where all of us, we was broke. There was some working class people, but everybody else was on Section 8, food stamps, and they was getting a welfare check. That was us. So, make a long story short, this is where I grew up. I was embarrassed by this kid, and that's really kind of where the journey began. So, I figured out how to do a couple of things. I was quite savvy for an 8-year old, 9-year old. I don't know how I figured this out, but I learned how to call the operator and tell the operator that I lost my money in the payphone. So they would send me little checks to my house, like $3.45, $4.25. So my grandmother, she's like, where you get this check from? So I don't know what lie I told her, but she fell for it. And she took me to the Altadena market to cash that check. And then they already knew me, so then I didn't need her anymore. So that's when I started going up to the front of, because that's where the mailboxes were, so that I could get my checks that were coming in the mail, so I could cash them, so that I could get Now Laters and Doritos and Country Time Lemonade and Hawaiian Punch and play Miss Pac-Man and eat pastrami cheese fries whenever I wanted to. So that I was living the life at 9 years old. So I was raised by my grandmother. My mom, who had moved away to Louisiana, had came back. I know now that she came back as an addict, but I didn't know that as a kid. So she came back. Her and my uncle decided that they were going to sell marijuana to the gang members. So the gang members were selling crack, which I didn't know that, and my mom and my uncle were selling them marijuana. So I figured out, so they're selling this green stuff to them and they're making money. Maybe I should do that. So this, rambunctious 9-year old, 10-year old kid is now selling marijuana in the neighborhood. And they never told on me. Nobody ever did anything to me. They didn't do anything to me. So now I went from having like $5 or $3.48 to having like $20. So I'm excited about my whole life. I'm like, man, I've hit the jackpot. And so that's how it all began, is I had a drive for money, to have access to cash at all times, because what I found, this little boy teased me about having food stamps. And in my mind, if you had food stamps, you weren't worthy. So life is going on. We moved to Washington when I was 12. By this time, I had already learned how to steal things so that I could make jewelry and sell it. I was still selling marijuana for a short time. By that time, my mom and uncle had become full-blown addicts and they didn't have access to marijuana anymore. And I don't think I was doing the payphone thing anymore. I think they caught on to me after a certain time. Pac Bell was like, this little girl keeps calling, and why is she so, how is she getting this money? So that kind of ran out. So I would buy candy and sell it at school. And that was my life. That's what I did. So by the age of 12, I was a full-blown hustler, entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it. That was me. And I was okay with that. So my grandmother, was just so much going on in the neighborhood. My grandmother was like, we're moving out to California. So she had started saying that in like 1984. And my uncle and his wife, my aunt, had moved up here. And my grandmother came to visit and she was like, we're moving to Seattle. So she keeps saying this, every 6 months. And so by the time August 1st, 1986 came, we were literally moving to Seattle. And I got tricked, because we moved here on August 1st, 1986. So all I see is the blue sky and the water. And I'm like, oh, we hit the jackpot. We're in California. I mean, we're in Seattle. This is a beautiful place. I didn't know that September was coming. I didn't know that October was coming, November or December. And I think it snowed that year. So I was like, what in the world? What did they bring me to? You then took me away from all my friends and my dad and moved me here to the rainy snow place. Okay. Well, it didn't take long for me to get back up to my old devices. So I went to Pick and Save. I think that's what it's called, Pick and Save. Start stealing all my little stuff so that I can make my jewelry, and started selling jewelry again. And then I figured out my grandmother would let me go down to the Seattle Center. How many of you guys have been to the Seattle Center before? And downstairs, they used to have this little wishing well, and you throw your money in there and you can make a wish. Well, I would scoop down in there and scoop all the quarters out so I can have money. And so somehow I came up with another plan, and I started telling my other friends that if we go down by Kmart in Renton and tell them that we lost our transfer, they'll give us $1 so we can get back on the bus. So we would literally go down there to that Kmart, which is Fred Meyer's now, and make like $20. We just stand there for like an hour and just tell people, "Oh my gosh, my transfer ran out and I just need $1 so I can get home." And they were like, "Oh, here you go, little girl." And so that's how I continue to have money in my pocket. So um, by this time, we moved from the south end of Seattle to the central district, and there was this guy who owned a corner store. I can tell on him because he's no longer here. His name is Old Man Neil. And he had this store, and he used to sell alcohol to the kids. So by this time, I had already tried it with my friends, and I was like, "Ooh, I like this." Because I wasn't a shy kid, but remember I talked about that worth thing? I had got to a point where I didn't value myself a whole lot. And so even though I had money, even though I had access to money because of the ideas that I came up with, I thought that that was the thing. Like, you're something if you have money, you have access to cash, you're somebody. And so life just started to kind of pick up. And by the age of 13, I was drinking with my friends. I want them to think that I was all this. So I was drinking 40 ounces, like getting drunk and all this crazy stuff. And like I had kind of made a name for myself. They was like, Frankie always got money, So I was like, I'm the cool kid. And lo and behold, I started meeting people in the neighborhood that were doing the same exact activity that I saw in California, which was jumping in and out of cars. I'm like, "What are you guys doing?" And they were like, "We're making money." And I was like, "Well, what kind of money are you making?" And they're like, "Well, we're selling crack." And I was like, "What is that?" And he opened up his hand, and I saw this little white stuff. And I'm like, "Crack?" And I'm like, "Well, what are you guys doing with that?" And they're like, "Yeah, they just come up and they give you the money and you just put it in their hand." I'm like, "What?" I was like, "I want some of that." And they were like, "Okay." So he said, "If you bring me $20, I'll give you one of these and I'll break it in half and you can make $40. I was like, "I can make $40?" So I ran home to my house. I went in my grandma's purse and stole $20. And I went and found him and I gave him the $20. And lo and behold, he gave me one little piece of crack. He cracked it in half. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." He was like, "When they come up to you and ask you if you have a 20, just give it to them. They give you $20. And it was true. And I couldn't believe it. So I was off to the races. I had figured out how to make $40 out of $20. Oh, I was so excited about my life. I'm telling you, like, I struck gold, okay? And so, needless to say, my life is going on. I'm living like this. I'm going to school. My grandmother's like, "This child is incorrigible. I don't know what to do with her." I had little brothers and sisters that I took no interest in whatsoever because they were 10 and 12 years younger than me. And I had started getting in trouble back in California because I wasn't helping out. Like, I wasn't the nurturing sister, helping them out. "Oh, this little kid's so cute." I'm like, "Why in the world did you have more kids? I was cool by myself." And so I treated them like that. So when I moved here and now I'm moving up in age and they're getting like 4 and 6 and all of that stuff, I'm literally like running away from home. I'm like, "I'm not coming back here. Like, I'm getting in trouble because I'm not taking care of your kids. Take care of your own kids." And so that was me. So I ran away. I'm living with my boyfriend at the age of 16. We're living downtown Seattle in motels. We're living our life. I'm living my best life. I just do whatever I want to do with whoever I want to do. I can smoke as much weed as I want to, have as much drink as I want to. By the way, I drink it Thunderbird. Yuck. Yeesh. Oh my gosh. So then I graduated. I thought I was doing something because I was drinking E&J now, right? So, we graduated from the old English and the Thunderbird, and now I'm drinking E&J. And so I'm just living my life. Next thing you know, I get myself in some trouble because these men, I'm only 16, these men try to rob me and my boyfriend. I get myself in some trouble because we had access to guns. I used a gun, and then all of a sudden I found myself in Echo Glen. And so I was in Echo Glen and I learned some things about myself there. I learned that I actually like to have a clean room. because our house was never really clean where I lived and grew up. So we had to clean our room. I learned that I actually liked being in a clean space. I like to know where my things were. If I was looking for something, I would know how to get to it. They used to sit us, because we were juveniles, we used to sit at a table just like this and have dinner, and just kind of talk back and forth. And I remember that at my dad's house, that we would have conversations and things like that. So I remember that I liked that. I also thought I remembered that I liked structure. I was able to get a job while I was there, and I worked in the kitchen. And I've always known how to cook, but then I learned how to cook in bulk because we had to cook for like 125 residents, I think it was. So I learned how to cook in bulk and things like that. And so I learned a lot there. Eventually, I spent, a couple years there, went to a group home, and then I entered back into society. Well, I went and found my old friends and just started living that life again. And when I tell you guys, my alcoholism became so bad, I started blacking out, having blackouts. And I thought that was just part of the process. Little did I know I was an alcoholic. I mean, like a real alcoholic. The alcoholic that they talk about in that book? That was me. But you couldn't have told me that, right? Because it was just like I have stuff because of that unworthiness. If you have stuff, that means that you're valuable, that you have value to you. And so that's how I, went along about in my late teens, early 20s, and just came in contact with so many different people. But I would come in contact with people who would actually affirm me. Like, I see this in you. I think that you're, I see this. But needless to say, half of them were like my clients that I was selling crap to. But they still saw something in me. They would just be like, "You're so positive. You have a good attitude. You're this." And I did that for a very long time. And people would always ask me, did I ever use the drug? And I never used it because when I was in California, what I heard people say is that they would talk about strawberries. Do you guys know what strawberries are? What a strawberry is? I don't think so. So a strawberry is a woman who performs sexual acts for crack. So they call them strawberries. So what I heard was if you smoke crack, you're going to be a strawberry. And I was like, I'm not using this drug. So literally, all jokes aside, that is the one reason why I never used the product that I sold because I didn't want to be a strawberry. So and when I tell people that story, they're like, "Are you kidding me? Is that the real reason why you never used it?" And I said, "That's the real reason. It's because I didn't want to be a strawberry." And so I'm moving on with my life. Now, when I was in juvenile, I read these books by Donald Goings and Iceberg Slim. Have you guys ever heard of Donald Goings and Iceberg Slim? Okay, I didn't think so. So Donald Goings was a pimp and a drug user in the early 60s and 70s in Detroit, Michigan. And so he started writing these books and telling these stories because that's how people want to know what he was doing. And that's how he got money for his habit. He was spitting these books out. And so obviously they got all in the jails and everything like that. And so most of the teenagers, if you're young, black, brown, and you've been to jail or juvenile, you have most likely read those books. And so one of the things that he talked about in those books is that he became an addict of heroin. And I was like reading these books, and one of the things that he said in one of his books, I think it's called Dope Fiend, is that when he went to jail, he was going to the bathroom on himself and throwing up at the same time. And I was like, I'm never using heroin. And so that's what scared me straight, literally reading these books. So the reason why I tell you that is because a lot of the times when you are in what people would call the game or the hustle, a lot of times people use their own supply. But I thought that that's what made me better than people was because I didn't use those drugs. But when you talk about somebody being an alcoholic, I am the real deal. I am the person who went from dark to light. I'm the person who went from wine to beer. I didn't really like beer, but I am the person because I thought that was the problem. I thought the problem was I'm just not drinking the right alcohol. And so, lo and behold, after my second DUI, I think I went into a meeting and I heard somebody talking, and I just didn't feel like I could relate to people because people were talking about living under the bridge and all of this stuff. And I'm like, well, I got a house, I got a car, I got some money, I got a man, I didn't lose my kids, my daughter to CPS. I am so much better than these people. But what I learned was that CPS should have took my daughter. The man wasn't no good anyway. Only reason why I had money is because I was selling drugs. The car that I had, that was a car that was bought with drug money. And the house was bought with drug money too. So I really wasn't no better than anybody else, but you couldn't have told me that. See, it was a worth thing. I didn't value myself. So I put myself in a lot of situations because I was only looking for one thing, and that was to put another dollar in my pocket. So, as you can imagine, I put myself in harm's way in multiple different ways. I dated men that sold drugs. I got robbed before at gunpoint, not once, but twice. One of them was my first cousin because he was so jealous of the fact that we were making money that he sent somebody to rob me. Okay. So it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, right? It was like, ooh, okay, maybe this isn't working. But I still kept going, still kept going. I was like, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm kind of smart, a little bit, kind of smart. And so I said, I'm gonna figure this out. And so I kept going and I kept going and I kept moving. And all along, I'm drinking and I started using ecstasy. And I'm telling you, that drug right there was like, oh, I done hit the big time. I got to get off of this stuff. And so by this time, I'm literally blacking out from alcohol. I'm literally blacking out from alcohol. And so I'm just at the point in my life where I'm like, this is not where it's at. Like, this is not where it's at for me. And so I decided that I was going to just not drink. So I became a dry drunk. And then all I did was just start smoke weed a little bit, but that was never really my drug of choice anymore. And so I did that for a while. And then I met this guy that I had been knowing for a while. And I ran into him at a friend's event. And I saw him and he didn't look the same like how he had looked before. And I was like, what happened to you? He was like, oh, I relapsed. I'm like, oh, okay. What'd you relapse on? He's like, crack. I was like, oh, okay. He's like, but I'm going back to treatment. So he goes back to treatment, and I'm on this dry drunk. And so I'm connecting with him. We're connecting, we're kind of vibing, we're talking. Next thing you know, he gets out of treatment, we're connecting, I'm going to meetings with him. And I'm starting to listen to people tell their story. Now, by this time, I still don't think that I'm an alcoholic because I still got my car, still got my house. I got rid of the man, still got my daughter, still got a couple dollars in the bank, right? And so what happened was I heard somebody tell my story in this meeting of being a blackout alcoholic. And I'd never heard anybody say that before. And I was like, okay, I'm listening. And what I heard was that really I was a late stage alcoholic. That's clinically what they would say. And I was like, oh, okay. So by this time I had now not smoking weed, not taking any pills, still on a dry drunk. I'm not anywhere thinking about sobriety really. I'm just really there to support my new little boyfriend that I met. And so I'm just trying to help him get sober because he's a crack addict and he really needs this. Not I'm just here, so he can get the help that he needs. So, needless to say, I get in the program and I hear my story. And I remember him, and I told him that I didn't drink anymore. I never told him that I was still smoking weed all the way almost up until the time that we really just kind of decided to start dating. So he was like, you should get a coin. He was like, you've done like about 2 years, don't you? And I was like, no. I was like, well, I haven't had a drink in almost 2 years. I was like, but I still was smoking a little bit of weed. He was like, well, when did you stop? And I was like, Yes, like a couple days ago. He was like, today is your birthday. So that's how I got my birthday, January 2nd, 2009. And by the time I got there and I started listening to the stories, I did feel like I belonged. It didn't matter what I had. The most important thing is that I had a hole in my soul. And Alcoholics Anonymous helped me feel that soul. I already had a God in my own understanding, but I didn't have a relationship with that God in my understanding. It wasn't until I came here that I reignited that passion, that connection, that wanting to have somebody who loved me just as much as I loved them, who wanted the best for me, right? They call it good, orderly direction. I needed all of that and some more. And so what happened was the guy that I came in with, who I was supporting, who needed the support because I didn't want him to go out and smoke crack again, he actually relapsed. And so it was the women in the program who put their arms around me and was like, I don't know what he's doing, but you ain't going with him. And so that's how I really got into this program. They thrust me into this program. They was taking me here, show up here, do this, go here, be here, do this, be at this meeting, go here, do that. And so I did that for 4 months before I got a sponsor. Wherever they told me to be, wherever they told me to go, I was there. I did that. And so then when I got a sponsor, who had a sponsor, who went to meetings, who did step work, I knew that this was the place that I was supposed to be. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot. And almost immediately, I stopped selling drugs. I stopped stealing. It took me a minute to stop buying food stamps. But eventually I stopped buying food stamps and I stopped lying on my taxes. And so I'm not saying I'm a stand-up citizen by no means, because I speed a little bit. And, but all of those things that I used to do, I don't do them anymore. And it's not because I can't, it's because I don't want to. My daughter is almost 30 years old now. She's struggling. And my grandkids, I have 4 grandkids. And here's the reality, none of them have ever seen me drunk. None of them have ever seen me under the influence of anything. And that's the best part of being in this program. Because what I did is I got my life back. I didn't know the life that I wanted to live, but I know the life that I didn't want to live. And because of this program, that's how I got to the place where I am now. Is my life the way that I want it to be? Absolutely not, because I don't have the man. But I do have a relationship with the God of my understanding. I have a relationship with some amazing women. I'm reconnected with my family. We just buried my dad last week, and I had to go down there and I met some family members that I have never met because I've been in Washington for so long. And that was really a good experience. It felt good because I've always felt like an only child, even though I wasn't. My dad has 20 kids. But it's between 20 to 22. There's some other ones that he claimed, but we like, those are not true. Those are not Joneses. And so what I learned is that God will put me in places so that I can connect with the people that I need to connect with. Like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I get to see all you guys' lovely faces, but God knows. I don't know what you're gonna get from my story because it was crazy and it's wild and there's more, but I gave you guys just like the frame of it. As you can only imagine, a young girl out in the community selling drugs, hustling, doing what she needs to do to make money. But I'm here today. I'm here with 17 years sober, and I haven't had a drink, a pill, or anything because I know where it will take me. And they say, never say never, right? They're like, never say never. Well, it's not that I'm never going to say never because I don't need to say any of that because I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep going to meetings. I'm going to do step work with my sponsor. I'm going to keep saying yes to I'm going to keep saying yes to service work. And I'm going to keep doing what the program has outlined for us. And it says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly follow our program. That's all I got.